A quick like and subscribe really helps our channel grow and allows us to bring you even more amazing content. Thank you for your support. I remember the night when everything I thought I knew about intimacy was turned on its head, a soft glow of fairy lights softly illuminating the room, casting dancing shadows on the walls as I nervously fiddled with the strap of my top. It was a small apartment, cluttered with the remnants of a busy life, books stacked haphazardly, unwashed coffee mugs dotting the surfaces like uninvited guests, and the faint sound of my partner, Jake, moving around in the kitchen, a few feet away. We've been together for over 2 years. Our relationship had blossomed slowly, nurtured by shared interests and a comfortable intimacy that I always thought was just enough. Yet, that night felt different. I had stumbled upon a thread on Ask Reddit earlier in the week titled "What's the best NSFW tip you wish others knew?" And, intrigued by the myriad of bold confessions, I felt a stirring of curiosity. As I read through the comments, I realized there was so much I had yet to explore, both within myself and with Jake. One particularly insightful reply suggested that couples often limit themselves by not communicating their desires, fears, and fantasies openly enough. That thought lingered with me as Jake walked into the living room, a gentle smile on his face, unaware of the internal storm brewing inside me. "Hey, you okay?" he asked, his brow furrowed slightly with concern. That question hung between us, heavy with unspoken words. The minutes stretched as we made small talk about our days, but I could feel an invisible barrier between us, a wisp of hesitation that I needed to break through. Seizing the moment, I took a deep breath, my heart racing as I ventured into the conversation I had long avoided. "What do you think about trying something new?" I said, my voice almost a whisper, the words tumbling out before I could take them back. Jake raised an eyebrow, his interest piqued. "New, like?" He prodded gently, a hint of excitement mingling with uncertainty. So, I took the plunge, sharing snippets of what I had read, my cheeks flushing as I laid bare my thoughts on desires I had tucked away, painting a picture of openness and exploration. To my relief, he listened, absorbed in what I said, his expression morphing from confusion to intrigue. What started as an awkward conversation soon flowed into a deeper discussion filled with laughter, vulnerability, and the sweet release of unburdening myself of my hidden wishes. As the night unfolded, we delved into our fantasies, each confession easing the tension between us as we discovered overlapping interests. One of us would share a thought, a dream of escapades just outside the realm of our everyday life, and the other would respond with enthusiasm, eager to explore these new waters together. Through this sharing, I noticed a shift, not just in our dialogue but in how I felt about our relationship. The electricity in the air seemed tangible, the space between us charged with possibility. But I did feel a shadow lurking in the recesses of my mind, the weight of societal expectations whispering doubts that perhaps we were overstepping, or worse, were we risking our comfortable bond for something ultimately unattainable? It was all a little frightening, yet exhilarating at the same time, a tango of emotions I hadn't anticipated. We eventually decided to act on one of my more adventurous suggestions, planning our first outing into an upscale adult store known for its open-minded staff and welcoming atmosphere. I was a bundle of nerves, unsure if we were stepping too far outside our usual groove. That Sunday afternoon, we entered the store hand in hand, a small thrill coursing through me as I noticed fellow couples exploring aisles, laughing over novelty items, and exchanging knowing glances, their comfort sparking a fire of liberation within me. Jake and I navigated the store, exploring various sections from sensual lotions to intriguing toys. To my surprise, our playful banter began to flourish between the seemingly mundane decisions of what to try or what to leave behind. As we picked up a few items that piqued our interest, there was an unspoken understanding that we were embarking on a journey together, not just exploring products but unearthing uncharted territories of our relationship, each item a step into deeper intimacy. As we left the store, our hands intertwined and our hearts aligned, I felt a warmth radiating from within, an affirmation that not only had we taken a literal step toward expanding our physical connection, but we had also broadened the emotional landscape of our partnership. The tips I had discovered were more than just recommendations, they had opened a portal to authenticity, revealing a freedom that was ours for the taking. From that day forward, we made it a habit to communicate openly about our desires, exploring new facets of intimacy without the fear of judgment. Our relationship deepened in ways we hadn't imagined, bonded by the courage to share even our most vulnerable thoughts. In reflection, I think what began as a simple Reddit thread expanded into something profound, our desire to connect, challenge boundaries, and grow together. Sometimes I look back on that night and realize how significant it was to confront insecurities and be brave enough to ask, what if? It was a lesson in trust, revealing a world where love thrives on understanding and exploration. A note of caution, though, as exhilarating as it was also essential to ensure that both Jake and I felt comfortable throughout this journey, emphasizing consent and check-ins, learning together at our own pace. I now understand that intimacy is a shared adventure, marked not just by the physical but by the emotional landscape we navigate side by side. And to anyone reading this, I say embrace communication. It could be the best NSFW tip you might ever receive. If you're interested, here's a little update. A few months have passed since that pivotal day, and we now schedule regular sessions to discuss what we want to explore, both inside and outside the bedroom. It's like an open book, each chapter revealing something new about ourselves we didn't know existed. There's a certain peace in knowing that we are on this journey together, continuously writing our story, one daring adventure at a time. Every day, I am reminded that intimacy is not just about the act, but rather the connection and openness that fuels it, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Sitting here in the dim light of the living room, I can hear the faint hum of the refrigerator mingling with the sounds of the outside world, distant laughter from neighbors, the soft rustle of leaves in the night breeze. It's peaceful, as if the universe is giving us a moment to breathe and reflect on all the changes that have unfurled since our profound revelation. What started as an awkward admission of desires has blossomed into this beautiful exploration of intimacy. My partner and I have discovered that the more we share our thoughts, fears, and fantasies, the closer we become. I used to think intimacy was a binary concept, a straightforward equation of bodies meeting, but as we've peeled back layers of ourselves, I now see it as an endless spectrum filled with nuances and textures. It's almost amusing to think about how naive I once was, operating under the belief that communication was secondary to the act itself, and yet, here I am, realizing that it's the very foundation of everything we've built together. We've established a weekly ritual of sorts, where we sit across from each other, sipping tea while delving into what sparks joy, curiosity, and even fear in our relationship. It's in those quiet conversations where I feel the weight of my heart begin to lift, as we dare to voice not only what we want but what we might want to explore. One evening sticks out in particular, a night marked by vulnerability. We had just come home after seeing an eclectic art exhibit that showcased intimate imagery and personal stories. The mere act of sharing the experience had ignited a discussion about our own narratives, and as I glanced at my partner, their eyes glimmering with shared excitement, I felt a surge of courage. What if we tried role-playing? I blurted out, a grin breaking across my face despite the flutter of nerves in my stomach. To my surprise, my proposal was met with a warm, welcoming smile, and in that moment, I knew we were embarking on yet another chapter. We spent the next week planning out characters and scenarios, giggling at the absurdity of it all while secretly indulging in the thrill of what lay ahead. And so, the night arrived. We had transformed our living room into a makeshift stage, complete with dim lighting, soft music, and props derived from random corners of our home. As we stepped into our roles, I found laughter blending seamlessly with anticipation, blurring the lines between performance and genuine connection. The boundaries we had once thought of as rigid began to dissolve, giving way to creativity and discovery. I felt liberated, comfortable donning a role that allowed me to explore facets of my personality I'd tucked away. What began as playful banter morphed into something far more powerful, a shared experience that unfurled layers of affection I didn't know existed. We explored fantasies that had previously felt too vulnerable to share, opening the door to discussions about attraction and desire in ways that deepened our bond. When everything was said and done, we collapsed into each other's arms, breathless and flushed, a laughter that echoed off the walls blending seamlessly with the warmth we shared. Looking back, it's incredible how that single suggestion blossomed into a vibrant exploration of ourselves. Together, we learned that intimacy, in its most profound form, is less about the individual acts and more about the trust and connection that fuels them. As I lean back against my partner now, their fingers tracing lazy patterns on my arm, I can't help but feel a wave of gratitude wash over me. The months past have shown us that adventure lies not only in grand experiences but also in the simple act of being with each other and opening up our hearts. Life, like our relationship, is a continuous journey filled with unexpected turns and revelations, and I find myself continually excited about what comes next. So here's to the chapters yet unwritten, the whispers shared in the dark, and the ever-evolving narrative of us. As I close my eyes, I wish I could bottle up this feeling, this notion that love and intimacy are but canvases awaiting our brushes, ready to be filled with the colors of our experiences and desires. Little did I know that this journey of discovery would be just the beginning, a prelude to further adventures we had yet to imagine, together embracing life with open hearts, guided by a delicate dance of trust, laughter, and love. In the weeks following that transformative conversation, my relationship with Alex took on a rhythm, like a well-rehearsed melody where each note felt harmoniously aligned, effortlessly flowing into the next. We found ourselves spending evenings sprawled across the couch, sharing secrets under the soft glow of fairy lights, peeling back layers of our emotions as if they were the wrapping on a much-anticipated gift. I remember one particular night vividly, when the air outside had just begun to cool, a sharp contrast to the warmth we created in our little bubble. We'd gorged on popcorn while watching silly movies, laughter spilling from us like wine from a too-full glass. Yet, as the credits rolled, a comfortable silence enveloped us, and I felt the itch for something deeper, an unspoken question floating softly between us. What if we took our exploration a step further? I whispered, my heart racing as I opened the door to vulnerability once again. Alex turned towards me, a teasing grin emerging on his face. Do you have something specific in mind? I felt heat rush to my cheeks, and with it, a mix of exhilaration and trepidation. We had traded ideas before, a sensual weekend getaway, that tantalizing game of truth or dare, but the notion that I was about to confess something more profound left me momentarily speechless. I don't know. Maybe a group setting? I managed, contrary to the fear edging its way into my mind. The thought of inviting others into our intimate dynamic felt raw and refreshingly dangerous, like standing at the edge of a cliff, ready to take a leap into the unknown. I held my breath, unsure of Alex's reaction, but to my relief, his eyes lit up with intrigue rather than skepticism. An open exploration, he mused, leaning closer, his expression a careful blend of excitement and caution. We delved into the idea over the following days, navigating our own boundaries and preferences, always careful to keep communication flowing freely between us. Our candid discussions brought us closer, igniting new flames within our connection, and soon enough, we found ourselves at a local gathering, an unofficial meet and greet for adventurous spirits seeking the same connection. As I walked into the room, Alex's hand in mine felt like both a reassurance and an anchor. I could feel the fluttering of uncertainty in my stomach, weaving itself around the warmth of excitement. The atmosphere was comfortably intimate, dimly lit with shadows dancing across the walls as laughter and soft music swirled around us. Just as we had both anticipated, we encountered people from all walks of life, the nervous newcomers like us and the seasoned adventurers who exuded confidence. We listened to stories shared in hushed tones, hiring glimpses of life lived boldly, each narrative leaving an imprint on our thoughts. It felt both surreal and electric, like walking through an art gallery at midnight, captivated yet hesitant to touch anything. The night wore on, a delicate balance struck between curiosity and intimacy, until eventually, I turned to Alex, both our eyes bright with wonder. How do we feel about this? I asked quietly, gauging the pulse of our experience. His reply was a soft smile that danced in the flickering light of the room, a silent acknowledgement that we were sailing together into uncharted waters. We ended the evening with new friends, a couple whose chemistry ignited something unexpected within me. As we shared stories and laughter over drinks, the thrill of that connection wrapped around my chest like a warm blanket, reminding me that intimacy isn't constrained to just one person. Rather, it can expand outwards, enveloping others in its embrace while still honoring the bond we had cultivated. The weeks that followed felt like a vibrant tapestry being woven together, threads of shared experiences intertwining with the foundation we'd built. We embraced not only our own touch but explored how that touch could ripple out through connections we had initiated at that event. We learned the art of inclusive intimacy, sharing moments that felt electric without ever diluting the love we held for each other. On the nights when we found ourselves in tangled sheets after returning home, we would share whispered secrets about our encounters, each word serving to stitch us closer together, binding us tighter with trust and understanding. The thrill of our home becoming a sanctuary where we explored our fantasies seemed almost surreal, and I drank it in like a fine wine. One particularly daring evening, we decided to host our own gathering, inviting the friends we'd met and easing ourselves deeper into this new chapter of exploration. It felt incredibly exhilarating to open our doors and let others experience a piece of our world. Soft music thrummed invitingly in the background as laughter echoed off the walls, filling the space with a camaraderie I never anticipated. I watched as Alex moved through the room, effortlessly engaging with the others, bringing his genuine warmth and charm to the forefront. My heart swelled with love and pride. Yet, amidst the laughter and connection, an unexpected moment arose. I found myself sharing a playful conversation with one of the guests, an intriguing individual who came alive in the night's energy. Our dialogue flowed easily, like a river carving through rock, each laugh becoming a bridge connecting our two worlds. Before I knew it, I felt a pang of vulnerability swell unexpectedly within me as I realized, in the warm hum of the gathering, that I was also flirting, experimenting with my own boundaries of intimacy and attraction. Would I share a kiss, a touch, or was this stepping too far? A flurry of emotions cascaded through me, an engaging blend of excitement and uncertainty as I pulled back, resting my gaze upon Alex, who was mingling just a few feet away. Would this be something we might explore, or would it breach our carefully laid boundaries? Catching my breath, I found solace in his reassuring smile as he met my eyes, a silent dialogue passing between us that spoke of trust and love. The thought of sharing this journey felt both liberating and terrifying, yet I could sense a profound sense of connection, an understanding that no experience would diminish the bond we had. After resolving the shifty feelings that danced around in my belly, I decided on openness. Would you be okay if I kissed them? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, feeling as though we were dancing along the fringes of a truth that was utterly beautiful in its complexity. Alex's grin deepened, and he nodded slowly, the warmth in his eyes beckoning me to dive further into this adventure we shared. With his approval echoing in my mind like a sweet melody, I took a bold step closer to the other person, allowing the swirling sensations of excitement and bonding to weave their magic around us. As I leaned in, the world around us faded, there was nothing but the shared laughter and the obliterating warmth of connection. In that moment, I simply felt alive, vulnerable, and unapologetically free. When the evening finally drew to a close, we slipped away from the vibrant energy, heads spinning with the thrill of what had transpired. Each moment echoed in my mind, carving pathways of feelings I had previously thought unattainable. As we laid together under the soft blankets of our bed, I turned to Alex, whispering my reflections on the experience we had shared. It felt right, didn't it? I said, my heart fluttering with joy at the thought of how we'd beautifully navigated this new territory together. It truly did, he replied, his eyes shimmering with understanding, because we faced it all, side by side. We fell into a comfortable silence, the night wrapping around us like a soft cocoon, knowing then that our journey was only just beginning. The chapter we had penned had opened us up to the infinite possibilities lying ahead. As I let sleep wrap its gentle embrace around me, I looked forward to every unwritten page. There would be more laughter, exploration, and discovery waiting for us, painting our lives in colors we hadn't yet imagined, reminding us that love and intimacy come in endless forms, secretly inviting us to embrace the beauty in each journey we share. It was a Saturday afternoon when I found myself sitting across from my younger brother, Sam, in our favorite coffee shop, the air filled with the rich aroma of brewing espresso and baked goods that set my nerves on edge more than I cared to admit. I loved Sam, really, he was funny and sweet, but sometimes his quirks, an endearing part of his autism, would test my patience. As he meticulously explained the minutiae of a video game I had no interest in, he kept pausing to correct me whenever I mispronounced a character's name or misunderstood the plot. I could feel the familiar irritation bubbling up, making me wonder if I was the only one who noticed. You don't have to correct me every single time, I finally blurted out, looking down at my coffee cup as if I were trying to see my own troubled reflection in the dark liquid. The cafe was buzzing around us, but in that moment, it felt like we were in our own world, one where I was both the older sibling and, apparently, the villain. I looked at Sam, his expression shifting from shock to hurt, and immediately wanted to retract my words. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it like that. But he didn't reply, just stared at his half-eaten muffin, as if the crumbs had suddenly become the most interesting thing in the room. I knew I should have just let him share his passion without interruption. After all, this was what made Sam happy, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had lost my temper and crossed a line. My thoughts raced, I was tired, overwhelmed with work and everyday life's pressures, yet here was my brother, excitedly sharing a piece of his world with me. Shouldn't I be more supportive? And yet, this constant need for accuracy felt suffocating at times. The more I thought about it, the more frustrated I became with myself. My silence hung heavy between us until he finally whispered, I just want to help. In that moment, it hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't merely about a character's name. It was about Sam wanting to connect, to share his knowledge, and my dismissiveness had dimmed that spark. As we left the cafe, I resolved to be more patient, to remember that my brother's corrections didn't stem from a desire to belittle me but from a place of connection, even if it sometimes felt stifling. A couple of weeks later, I found myself texting him random things I was learning from a podcast about his favorite games, asking for his thoughts and deepening our conversations. We still had our moments, sure, I still occasionally winced when he'd launch into a correction I didn't ask for. But each time it happened, I reminded myself why I loved hearing him speak about his passions, and I found my frustrations melting away. I'd like to think I wasn't the asshole in this story after all, but someone learning to navigate this complex bond. It was a rainy Saturday afternoon when it hit me just how much progress we'd made. I was curled up on the couch with a steaming mug of tea, listening to the sound of raindrops tapping against the window, and I had this overwhelming urge to share something exciting I'd learned about an upcoming game release that we'd both been anticipating. Instead of the involuntary dread I usually felt, I picked up my phone, hesitated for just a moment, and texted him. "Hey, I just read they're adding an interdimensional feature to the new game, can you believe it?" Within seconds, my brother's text alert chimed. "Yeah. Interdimensional travel means they could really expand the story. I hope they keep the parallel universe idea in mind." I felt a surge of warmth in my chest, a connection that felt more genuine than any correction he'd ever thrown my way. It was moments like these that reminded me how deep our bond ran, masked beneath layers of quirks and differences. Of course, that didn't mean everything was perfect. Just a week later, I made the seemingly innocent mistake of calling one of the game characters a villain during one of our usual gaming sessions. Almost instantly, he shot back a correction, pointing out that the character's motives were far more complex than my casual label suggested. "You know his backstory is about redemption, right? You can't just label him like that." I felt the familiar sting of irritation creeping back in, but I paused. I was about to reply with a snarky retort when I remembered the conversations we had been sharing, the laughter and insights eclipsing the corrections. Instead, I took a breath and said, "Fair point. I needed that reminder. I sometimes get way too caught up in my impressions." His surprise was palpable even through the screen. "Glad you see it that way. The story is nuanced. Learning and understanding make it even more exciting." He didn't know it, but I was beginning to feel the weight of my previous frustrations lift, replaced with a sense of appreciation for how much more he had to offer. Slowly, I started consciously approaching our conversations with curiosity rather than defensiveness. Sometimes I'd even invite his corrections, framing them as challenges rather than annoyances. It became a game of sorts. What knowledge could he share next? Our hangouts transformed from mere game nights into deep dives where he could geek out about characters, plot points, and storytelling techniques. Yes, I still occasionally winced at the over-explanations or overly detailed corrections, but now, instead of seeing them as bothersome interruptions, I began to find them oddly charming. They were pieces of my brother that shaped him into who he was, a passionate perfectionist with a heart bursting at the seams for his interests. I also discovered that in those moments of explaining, something beautiful happened. We were bonding over the nuances of the narratives we both adored. One Sunday, we decided to take a break from our usual weekend routine to watch a movie marathon based on some of our favorite game franchises. A few hours in, I noticed something magical unfolding. He was animated, speaking excitedly about how he would adapt the stories differently. "You know, if I were to write this, I'd change the ending completely. It's not true to the character's development," he said, eyes bright with enthusiasm. Instead of asking him to dial it back or find a quieter volume, I just smiled and nodded, letting his passion wash over me like an invigorating wave. I chimed in with my own ideas, and before long, we were brainstorming a story of our own, piecing together plot lines and character arcs as if screenwriting was a game in itself. It felt like both of us were learning in that moment, not just about the movies or games we loved, but about each other, who we were as siblings, and how we could evolve. I had to admit, there was something healing about this shift. I've learned that sometimes, it takes a little vulnerability to bring two people closer. Maybe I wasn't just tolerating his corrections anymore. Maybe I was actually embracing his perspective, recognizing that our divergent approaches were a tapestry that made our relationship rich and vibrant. As the rain continued to patter softly against the windows, I luxuriated in the knowledge that we were navigating this complex relationship together. I found myself feeling grateful, hoping that even as my brother poured out corrections, I could do my part to help him see that his voice mattered to me. It may still get complicated sometimes, but I felt that complexity was what made our bond so beautifully unique. And maybe, just maybe, it was this all-encompassing journey through learning and understanding that turned out to be the real win. One quiet afternoon, as I perched on the edge of my bed, fully immersed in the imaginary worlds of my favorite fantasy novel, my phone buzzed insistently. It was him, of course, my brother, the ever-passionate encyclopedia of all things gaming. I felt a tingle of excitement mixed with a hint of anxiety, That familiar nod as I wondered if this text would be another innocent inquiry or a deep dive into one of his meticulous corrections. Did you know that in the lore of Arcadia, the main character actually has a hidden backstory that ties in with the prophecy? I smiled at his enthusiasm, picturing him animatedly pacing around his room while typing. Yeah, I just learned about that on a podcast. I replied, careful to convey my interest. That's when he dropped it. I'm glad you like it, but you actually missed a couple of key points. You see. And there it was, that familiar avalanche of information I hadn't asked for, cascading down like an unexpected rain shower. My first instinct was to feel that familiar frustration rising, a heat creeping up my neck. But this time something clicked inside me. Instead of letting that prickly feeling take hold, I chose to breathe, sinking deeper into the moment, feeling the vulnerability behind his enthusiasm. I wasn't just being corrected, I was witnessing his excitement and love for a topic that mattered deeply to him. Dude, I really appreciate you sharing this with me, I texted back, and I'm totally here for the details. But I also want to dive into this together, you know? I want to connect over it, not just absorb facts. There was a pause, and for a moment, I worried I might have crossed a line again. But a few moments later, my phone chimed with his reply. Okay, I can try that. I just get really excited, and I want you to know everything. And in those few exchanged messages, I felt like I was glimpsing a new layer of our relationship, one built on understanding, empathy, and respect. The rain continued to rhythmically tap against the glass, a soothing soundtrack to my thoughts as I contemplated how this new approach could alleviate that tension that sometimes bubbled between us. It felt like stepping into a dance. I was learning the rhythm, realizing I didn't have to lead or follow, just move together. In the weeks that followed, our conversations evolved in unexpected ways. We began sharing our interpretations of his favorite games, parsing through characters and plots, discovering that sharing ideas was just as enriching as correcting each other. One Thursday evening, we settled down for a marathon of an old game, the kind that made us both nostalgic. As I stumbled through levels and faced wily enemies, he grinned at my blunders but hesitated to correct me. Instead, he cheered me on, his encouragement washing over me like a warm breeze. I could feel the shift in our dynamic, like turning a page in a book where the story finally aligns. By the time I slammed that virtual sword into the final boss, we both erupted into cheers, the air thick with camaraderie. It was genuine. It was beautiful. Reflecting on our journey, I realized we were two flawed yet perfectly unique characters navigating this intricate world together, learning to appreciate each other's quirks. Sure, there might be hiccups now and then, maybe some unexpected corrections still would slip through, but now, when they did, I'd remind myself of this growth, this bond that was as rich and vibrant as the stories woven into our favorite games. Looking back, I didn't just learn how to handle those moments of correction, I learned to cherish our conversations, seeing them as threads that connected us in ways I never fully understood before. This journey wasn't just about me, it was about us building and redefining how we communicated. And as I sank into my pillow that night, listening to the pitter-patter of the rain, I felt so much more at peace with the trials of our relationship, grateful to navigate this complex tapestry together, wondering what stories we would continue to weave as we journeyed forward. I never imagined my life could pivot so dramatically over something as mundane as a locked door, but here I am, recounting the events of that fateful evening with a sense of incredulity that still lingers. My name is Alex, an ordinary 30-something guy with a desk job and a comfortable little home nestled in a quiet suburban neighborhood. I've always prided myself on being a conscientious husband, but like everyone else, I have my moments of negligence, and perhaps it was a combination of those moments that set this all in motion. It was a Thursday night, typical in every way, until I caught a glimpse of my wife, Laura, standing by the front door, her expression a mixture of frustration and disbelief, the kind that made my chest tighten in an instant. She was holding the doorknob, twisting it back and forth while I was half awake from a cozy couch nap, remnants of my evening routine still fresh in my mind, the warm glow of the TV, a snack bowl emptied, and the soft hum of the world outside. Laura asked me, with a sting of disappointment, if I had checked the lock after she'd gone to bed, and as I rubbed the sleep from my eyes, I realized I had utterly spaced on that detail, again. I shrugged it off at first, making casual remarks about how I trust our neighborhood and how we had lived there for years without incident. But in the back of my mind, I felt a creeping unease as I watched her react, her brow furrowed as she responded, "It's not about trusting the neighborhood, Alex. It's about being safe." A part of me wanted to laugh it away, to dismiss her concerns as overreactions like I once did during our years together, but as she continued to express her frustration, I felt a knot forming in my stomach, linking back to my own lack of accountability. Was I really that oblivious? It became clear that this situation was a metaphorical lock waiting to be clicked open, revealing deeper issues that may have long since festered beneath our shared surface. Days passed, and the conversation wafted in and out of my mind, my interactions with Laura feeling increasingly stifled like the air on a humid summer day. I'd watch her move through the house, her movement subtle yet heavy with a sense of grounded concern, the way a cloud hangs low and suspenseful, threatening rain. I noticed the little things, the way she double-checked the locks on the windows during the day, her growing habit of closing the blinds earlier than usual, her hesitance to walk to the mailbox alone. The peaceful rhythms of our life together felt interrupted as I tried to ignore the gnawing sensation at the back of my mind. The evening we normally spent side by side on the couch morphed into quiet, fragmented moments filled with awkward silences. It all came to a head one night when I returned home later than usual after meeting some friends for dinner. There she stood in the living room, awaiting my arrival like a lighthouse beacon cutting through the fog, arms crossed with a stern look on her face that I'd never seen aimed directly at me. I opened my mouth to greet her, but the words caught in my throat. I could sense it was more than just the locked door. "Did you even check the door?" Her voice was steady but tinged with a puncturing edge that stung more than I cared to admit. I hesitated, the silence stretching into a chasm. "No, I didn't," I finally admitted, the echo of those words reverberating through the room like a confession made under duress. "I just assumed you had it." It felt pathetic, my own excuse evaporating into the atmosphere. My stomach twisted again, I could see pain flickering through her eyes, an emotion beyond mere frustration, a sense of betrayal, of being let down by me, the one person she should be able to count on. Suddenly, it struck me, it wasn't just about the door, it was about trust, about dependence, about the fragile threads that held together our relationship. I realized how much she leaned on me, expected me to be her rock, and I had neglected even the simplest thread keeping our safety intact. As we sat on the couch that night, the air thick with unspoken words and fragile hopes, I squeezed her hand and spoke softly, "I'm sorry. I thought I was being rational, but I wasn't being responsible. I promised to do better, to pay attention, to make you feel safe, not just when it's convenient for me." She responded by tracing her fingers along my palm, the tension easing as the minutes passed. The silence transformed from oppressive to contemplative, and we found ourselves deep in conversation, navigating our fears, our trust, and the small yet pressing details of our shared lives. As the moonlight spilled through the window, I understood that the lock was just a symptom of a deeper issue, my unpredictability and her need for assurance. Weeks later, our routines began to shift. I made it a point to verify every lock, not just for Laura, but as a symbol of my commitment to being present and responsible. The atmosphere in our home brightened, she smiled more, and we dove into rebuilding that connective thread, one soft conversation, one warm touch at a time. Reflection filled those quiet moments. We'd sit together on the couch, and as she leaned against me, I felt a new kind of peace emerging from our shared vulnerability. And so, in the spirit of Reddit tradition and as a reflection of this journey, I find it important to add this update. The evening I thought we were heading toward a rift transformed instead into an awakening. It wasn't just about the door or even the act of locking it. It became a way to openly articulate our needs, desires, and fears. I learned that perhaps it wasn't an AITA situation at all. Perhaps, instead, it was AITA, am I trying to learn? Because in that small, seemingly trivial episode, I discovered something profound about love, trust, and the importance of the little things in creating a safe harbor we could always come home to. The door has never been left unlocked. Again, and neither have our hearts. As the weeks rolled into months following our profound conversation about the door, I found myself reflecting on the subtle transformations in our relationship. It became a game of sorts, where each night, as I prepared to settle into bed, I would gently remind Lucy to double-check the lock, teasing her playfully about my newfound security obsession. I could feel the fortress we were building, not merely around our home but within each other, grow stronger and stronger. It was surprising how such a simple act could blossom into moments filled with tenderness and laughter, a little more anticipation before sleep took us. We began establishing new rituals, little habits that weren't mandated by duty but born out of a desire to nurture our partnership. Each evening concluded with us sharing a cup of tea on the porch, watching the day melt into night, with the faint sounds of crickets filling the air, a gentle reminder that life outside continued in a rhythm we were beginning to appreciate together. I started to look at our relationship with a new lens, where open communication became our foundation, and vulnerability, once a source of anxiety, transformed into our shared strength. I cherished those confiding moments with Lucy, preparing dinner together and laughing over burnt bread, the usual small talk evolving into deeper discussions about our hopes for the future. Conversations flowed like sacred threads binding us closer, so much so that I almost forgot what it felt like to walk that thin line of misunderstanding that we had been teetering on prior. It amazed me how our vulnerabilities morphed into stepping stones, carving pathways to rediscover the intricacies of each other's souls, learning, once again, what made us who we were. There were times, of course, where we stumbled. There were disagreements around financial decisions or the occasional miscommunication that prompted a surge of frustration, but even then, instead of retreating into silent resentments, we breathed, discussed, and gently nudged each other toward a healthier understanding. I realized that those moments are just as essential as the laughter-filled ones. They rounded us out. However, the true test of this new dynamic came on a chilly autumn night. The air bit fiercely against our cheeks, and the neighbors' laughter echoed through the street, reminding me of the warmth radiating from our home. Lucy and I were cozied up on the couch, engrossed in a movie, when suddenly an urgent knocking interrupted the cozy ambience. My heart raced. Was it a stranger? A lost traveler? That familiar feeling of anxiety tugged at my chest as I glanced at Lucy, who only nodded, encouraging me to check the door. It felt as if time had slowed. I walked to the front door, the wooden floor creaking beneath my weight, feeling every heartbeat pulsing in my ears. Peering through the peephole, I was met with a young girl, maybe 10 years old, shivering and teary-eyed. I opened the door just enough to speak. "Hey there, are you all right?" Her face was lost in shadows, but I could make out the tremor of her chin and the way she rubbed her arms together, as if trying to generate warmth. I got lost. Can I call my dad? He's just around the corner." My mind spun. Here I was, in our safe bubble, our haven, facing a potential crisis. A moment of fear tangled with empathy bubbled inside me. It was a test of everything we had learned, our commitment to openness, to addressing fears head-on. "Of course, sweetie, come in," I said, opening the door wider and motioning for her to step inside. As the warmth enveloped her, she glanced back at the darkened street, her eyes wide with uncertainty. I knew that this small act could either shield her further from threats or potentially lead to something more dangerous. Lucy joined us, her nurturing presence illuminating the moment, and we quickly settled into a space of safety and comfort. I reached for my phone, handed it to the girl, and patted her on the shoulder. "Just dial the number you remember. We're right here with you." The girl's hands shook as she dialed, her voice barely a whisper as she spoke to her father. She relaxed slightly upon hearing him say he was on the way, and when she hung up the phone, her relief washed over me, filling the room with a profound quiet that seemed to hold stories of fear and safety in equal measure. When her dad finally arrived, our home transformed again, this time into a sanctuary, a temporary refuge. The girl rushed into her father's arms, and I felt an overwhelming gratitude that we were able to offer even this tiny comfort amidst her disarray. After exchanging pleasantries and ensuring she was safe, the father made it clear how invaluable our kindness was, lighting a small flame of warmth within me. After they left, as Lucy and I settled back down on the couch, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for everything in our life together. It suddenly struck me that it wasn't merely about locking the door, it was about being open to the world outside, understanding that the safety and love we built weren't just for ourselves but could spill over into interactions that mattered with everyone around us. The door, once just an entryway to our home, had morphed into a symbol of our commitment to compassion and understanding, not just for each other but for anyone who crossed our threshold. I turned to Lucy, and we exchanged a smile filled with warmth and an unspoken promise that we would always remain open, vulnerable but secure, cautious yet loving, a true masterpiece of coexistence. And in those moments of quiet reflection, surrounded by the fading light of the evening, I finally felt the weight of the world lift just a little, reminding me that love doesn't simply build walls, rather, it constructs bridges that lead us back to humanity, again and again, one gentle reminder, one locked door, at a time. As the sun dipped beneath the horizon, casting long shadows across our cozy living room, I could feel the gentle hum of evening settling in, the kind that wraps you in a cocoon of comfort. Lucy had lit a few candles, their soft glow flickering in harmony with the settling tranquility of the night. It was a small ritual we had embraced, a moment of unwinding where the chaos of the day seemed to melt away. The warmth of her presence reminded me that we had crafted a safe space together, not just through the physical act of locking the door, but through the emotional openness we had nurtured in our relationship. Pacing softly, I felt grateful for this revelation, how something as simple as a door could serve as a metaphor for our willingness to safeguard one another's vulnerabilities. Remember that night? Lucy asked, her voice laced with a gentle nostalgia as she curled up on the couch, her eyes sparkling with memories. The one where we both brainstormed a list of our fears? She chuckled lightly, and I joined in, recalling a time when our insecurities seemed larger than life. We had laughed as we shared everything from mundane anxieties about work to deeper concerns about our relationship. That honest exchange had unknowingly paved the way for our newfound understanding of what it meant to connect, truly connect, beyond surface-level conversations. Yeah, I replied, settling in beside her and draping an arm around her shoulders. It's amazing how vulnerability can turn into strength if we let it. The moment felt precious, the world outside blurring into insignificance as we cocooned ourselves in this intimate bubble of safety. We began to share not just our fears, but our dreams, each whisper more soothing than the last, forming a tapestry of hopes that we would nurture together. I felt a rush of contentment, realizing that each lock I checked, each door I secured, was a commitment, an act of love that transcended fear and doubt. As the bits and pieces of our evening unfolded, conversations sparked like fireworks, our discourse ranging from future vacations we dreamed about to our desire to bring a pet into our home. Lucy was still talking about getting a dog, something I had initially hesitated over, wary of the added responsibility, but the way she spoke, her eyes lighting up at the thought, began to chip away at my resistance. A dog would be more than just an addition to our lives, it would be a shared experience, a reminder of how love could flourish in the little moments, from morning walks to lazy afternoons spent on the couch. With every word exchanged, I felt the door we had just locked moments before transform into one that swung wide open, inviting in a rush of warmth. As the candles flickered gently, casting playful shadows on the walls, I could see what lay ahead of us, a future painted in shades of laughter, compassion, and unwavering support. It was empowering to realize that we weren't just locking away our fears, we were also sealing in our joys, ensuring that nothing could breach the sanctuary we were building together. In time, as the evening wore on and the moon cast a silver glow through our window, I took a moment to breathe deeply and internalize the warmth of this connection we were nurturing. The world outside felt distant, almost irrelevant, as I realized that our relationship had morphed from merely coexisting to truly living, a shared journey where each step was marked by intention and understanding. Have you ever thought about how locking the door is kind of a ritual? I mused aloud, breaking the comfortable silence that had enveloped us like a soft blanket. Lucy nodded, her dark hair catching a glimmer of candlelight. It's the first step we take in closing out the outside world, she said thoughtfully, but it also makes space for us to just be, here, in our little world. It's our way of saying, this is our time. We matter. Yes. I replied, feeling a swell of pride and love. It wasn't just about locking the door, it was about what it symbolized, the commitment to honor our space and each other. The balancing of boundaries and openness that allowed for growth without losing our individuality. I couldn't help but smile, envisioning the dog we might someday share. Next door might be the kids, or the noise of the world, but in this moment, it's just us. As the last flicker of the candles dimmed, I felt a deep reassurance envelope me, a tender acknowledgement that our bond was evolving in ways that were once unimaginable. I snuggled closer to Lucy, feeling the warmth radiating from her, a beacon in the cool night. The locked door wasn't just a safeguard, it was a promise we had made to each other, a vow to always return to the safe harbor we had created. And so, as I closed my eyes and allowed sleep to wash over me, I found solace in the laughter that echoed through the evening and the new dreams we would embrace upon waking. A door locked, yet ajar with possibility, standing as a testament to our journey. And with that, I drifted into sleep, content, loved, and forever learning. It's strange how success can turn familiar faces into strangers, and I found that out the hard way. Just 3 years ago, I was scraping by, working endless hours for a salary that barely covered my bills, while dreaming up my own tech startup. I had wrestled with self-doubt. My wife Lily's family often reminded me of my shortcomings in the most subtle, backhanded ways. During family gatherings, I could always count on Grandma Marge to chuckle lightly and say, "Oh, sweetie, maybe when you grow up you'll find a real job." Or there was my brother-in-law Dave, who would mention my entrepreneurial dreams with an eye roll, citing the statistics of failed startups over a whiskey glass that glinted like a mocking star. They thought they were being jovial, but the undercurrent of disdain was unmistakable, and though I always laughed it off, deep down, it hurt. After countless late-night brainstorming sessions, those sleepless nights turned into something tangible, I launched my company and, against all odds, it began to flourish. I found my stride, hiring talented individuals, attracting investors, and suddenly, the landscape of my life had transformed overnight. As my bank account swelled and the aura of success enveloped me, I was astonished by the way my in-laws began to treat me. It felt as if their earlier skepticism had turned into sudden affection, their calls more frequent, their invitations more insistent. They would ask me for advice on their own ventures. Dave needed help with his small electronics shop, while Marge requested funding for her local charity. At first, I thought it was great. Surely this is what family does, right? We lift each other up. But after a while, the old feelings of resentment resurfaced. Their previous comments echoed in my mind each time I received a new request. I dug deep into myself and realized I was no longer the person they had always looked down on. One bittersweet afternoon, while I savored a cup of coffee and stared out the window at the busy street below, I made my decision. From that moment on, I stopped aiding them. No more money, no more advice, nothing. I felt a strange mix of liberation and guilt. How could I justify this? Was I really an asshole for wanting to distance myself from their past condescension? I recounted to Lily what I had done, my heart heavy with fear of her reaction. She was quiet for a long time, then she simply asked me how I felt about it. I admitted that I felt empowered, but I also worried that it made me unkind, perhaps unforgiving. "You deserve the respect you've earned," she finally said, reaching out to squeeze my hand. It was reassuring, but the nagging doubt remained. Soon enough, Thanksgiving rolled around, and the air was thick with tension. As expected, they were all too eager to reunite and discuss my success over turkey and stuffing, but I felt like a ghost at my own table. All the smiles felt forced, their inquiries laced with a touch of desperation and inadequacy. When Grandma Marge asked for a loan to help refurbish her house, I simply smiled and said I couldn't, that I was focusing my resources on my business. The silence that followed was deafening. I could practically see them reeling, struggling to reconcile the image of the once struggling me with the successful version I had now become. It dawned on me that perhaps they feared my rise. I had become the embodiment of everything they used to mock. Eventually, the evening wore on with awkward conversation and strained laughter. It seemed the air of pretension engulfed us, heavier than the dishes piled around the table. As we said our goodbyes, Grandma whispered, "You know, sweetie, it's good to see you doing well. Just remember, family is everything." I nodded, but inside, I felt a strange emptiness, a realization that maybe it wasn't that simple for me anymore. Days turned into weeks, and as I walked the fine line between emotional isolation and newfound freedom, I wavered between self-assurance and regret. I still thought of those family gatherings, how they had shifted so drastically, like falling leaves, beautiful yet tragic. A few months later, after a long day of work, I received a message from Dave, revealing the struggles he faced with his shop. In a moment of weakness, I contemplated extending my hand again but then recalled those biting words from the past. Choosing to stay true to my convictions brought a sense of solace and resoluteness. So, I crafted a balanced response, offering a single piece of advice. Stay determined. You have it in you to succeed. It was an echo, a reassurance of what I had once been. As I laid down that night, I realized I might not be the one in the wrong. Sometimes, severing ties isn't unloving, it's an act of self-preservation. And who knows? Maybe one day we could find a way back to each other. Maybe their perceptions would change, perhaps mine would too. With that thought, I drifted into a dream, a serene visage of hope amidst uncertainty. Update: several months later, I've been contacted again by my in-laws, this time more amiable, with heartfelt apologies and a recognition of their previous behavior. They've actually sought out some of my advice for their own businesses, and while I remain cautious, I'm willing to extend a hand again, just a little. Maybe the road to healing is slow and winding, but I'm finding peace in this journey. As the months rolled on, I often found myself reflecting on those turbulent times with my in-laws. Their negativity had loomed like a shadow over my accomplishments, dampening the pride I felt in my newfound success. Yet, as I watched my own business flourish, I began to ponder whether their critique had been more a projection of their insecurities than a true measure of my worth. I used to dread family gatherings, worrying that I'd have to endure their condescension, but now there hung this strange possibility in the air, an olive branch of sorts. When I received the message from my sister-in-law, I felt a mix of anticipation and caution. Her words were different this time, dripping with sincerity and regret, a stark contrast to the disbelief I had grown accustomed to. "Can we talk? We've been thinking a lot about everything," she typed, and each word pulled at a thread of hope I had nearly severed. That evening, I decided to meet her for coffee, carrying the weight of my reservations like a heavy cloak. As I walked into that familiar cafe, the scent of roasted beans enveloped me, grounding me as I scanned the room for her. When our eyes met, I noticed the tremor in her hands. It mirrored how I felt inside. Practically tiptoeing around the remnants of past grievances, we exchanged pleasantries before she dove in, expressing how their thoughts had shifted. "We've watched you grow from afar. It wasn't fair to judge you the way we did, and I realize now how deeply I misrepresented you," she confessed, sincerity shining in her eyes, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of empathy surface for her struggles. Listening to her recount her own setbacks and the toll they had taken on her self-esteem, a part of me shifted as well, as I understood that we all wrestle with our defeats. I shared my experience, too, describing the pressure of climbing the ladder of success alone, a journey filled with both exhilaration and loneliness. As we spoke, the barrier between us began to dissolve, but the lingering distrust still lingered like an uninvited guest. Nonetheless, I sensed a desire for reconciliation growing, patchwork stitching together the ripped seams of family loyalty. Later, when I returned home, my wife greeted me with a knowing smile. She could tell I'd been wrestling with my emotions but also saw the subtle shift in my demeanor. I felt lighter, as though carrying this burden for so long had only bound me, and I wasn't convinced the past could ever truly be forgotten, but perhaps it could be transformed into something new. Over the next few weeks, I exchanged messages with my in-laws, cautiously engaging with their requests for advice, offering my insights into their ventures. They were eager to learn, humbled in ways only harsh reality can teach, and I found myself reveling in the irony that I, once the scorned, now played the role of mentor. As I watched them embrace their new roles, peacefulness enveloped me. Within the cracks of our past, budding companionship sought to emerge. But with every message and every encounter, I kept my heart grounded, vigilant against letting history repeat itself. Trust takes time to mend, and while the path forward is uncertain, I've realized that healing often requires both vulnerability and boundaries. I might have stepped into this journey tentatively, but each small interaction now feels like a step toward a brighter future. Am I the asshole for having almost severed ties? Perhaps. But sometimes, in the space where hurt and healing collide, understanding can create a bridge, one where I've started to rebuild, one cautious step at a time. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself in a peculiar state of reflection, teetering on a tightrope stretched between the past and the potential future. Each email from my in-laws pierced the silence of my routine, a mixture of trepidation and curiosity spiraling through me. I would sit at my desk, the golden afternoon light spilling through the window, casting patterns on the floor, and I would stare at their names on the screen as if they were foreign inscriptions from a long-gone civilization. It wasn't that I wanted to forget their past behavior, how they had scoffed at my ambitions and belittled my modest beginnings in favor of grounded expectations, but there was something persistently hopeful about their current tone. Their messages dripped with sincerity, laced with admissions of previous harshness, and I wondered if they, too, felt the weight of that pivotal moment when my little tech business surged into a thriving venture. It became evident that they weren't just reaching out with empty niceties, they were grappling with their own narratives, reconciling their feelings, and wondering if the family they had once deemed beneath them could now be considered a source of guidance. In one of those exchanged emails, they proposed a casual lunch, a neutral ground, a safe space for both sides to express and explore without the stifling attachment of unresolved tension. I found myself conflicted, tapping my fingers against the polished wood of my desk, picturing the cafe where we might meet, a quaint little spot with soft jazz playing in the background, birds chirping outside, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee wafting through the air. What if I walked in, and the very sight of them ignited a whirlwind of my old hurt? Or what if, in the midst of pleasantries, I found a surprising twist of warmth amidst our shared history? Ultimately, I decided to agree to the lunch. Perhaps it was the willingness to embrace both the potential for pain and healing that propelled me forward. As the date approached, I crafted a mental script, a blend of caution and openness, how I might articulate my feelings but blend them with understanding. The moment I stepped into that cafe, my heart raced with each breath, a symphony of uncertainty built within me. I saw them there, my in-laws, sitting at a sun-drenched table, visibly different from the sharp-edged figures of my memory. Their smiles were soft, framed by an unfamiliar tenderness that made it hard to reconcile with the past. The conversation began stilted, filled with careful pleasantries and awkward laughter until eventually, warmth began to seep in, easing the tension like the gentle coverage of a summer blanket. As we talked about benign topics, I felt an invisible barrier start to wane, replaced by a creeping sense of shared humanity. Their stories of struggles echoed my own, their dreams revealing shades of ambition that once felt hidden beneath their dismissive exterior. Something within me flickered, a burgeoning understanding fueled by empathy. I saw them not as the antagonists of my story but as individuals who, like me, were navigating their own trials in a rapidly shifting world. The discussion eventually shifted towards our businesses. I could feel them leaning closer, seeking not just my counsel but aiming to share in mutual growth. And as I offered insights, I realized that this was what healing looked like, not denial of the past but rather embracing it as part of the complex tapestry of relationships. It felt liberating, almost as if by extending my hand despite my previous reservations, I was affirming my worth not just as a son-in-law but as a person with insights worth sharing. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, a new rhythm began to form. We exchanged phone calls that seemed to ease into the comfort of familiarity, their laughter weaving through my days like the melody of a calming hymn. Their once utilitarian approach to me transformed into a blooming collaboration of ideas. There was an almost childlike enthusiasm in their exchanges, a realization that they could learn from me just as much as I could learn from them. It was a refreshing reversal of roles that dispelled the lingering shadows of resentment. Yet, I upheld my boundaries. I was watchful, guarding against the cynical whispers that danced in the corners of my mind, reminding me of the bitter words once spoken. It was a balance, one that required patience and discernment, but I knew that healing isn't merely a linear journey. It's more like a winding path through an intricate forest, where even the hard roots can display breathtaking blooms when nurtured patiently. Sometimes, I still find myself reflecting on whether my initial decision to put distance between us was right. Am I the asshole for having almost severed ties? The answer remains murky, cloaked in the complexities of human emotion and interaction. Yet, through this journey, I have come to embrace the ambivalence, allowing it to shape me rather than confine me. I realize that forgiveness is not an erase button but rather an ongoing negotiation of ourselves with those we share history with. And so, where once I felt fragmented, haunted by the past, I now sit in a quieter place, knowing that bridges can be rebuilt if we are willing to put in the effort, and that sometimes, it's in our grappling with hurt that we stumble upon unexpected beauty. Perhaps it's true, sometimes, the road doesn't lead back to where we began, but rather forward, towards something entirely new. For as long as I can remember, there has been a phrase that rattled around in my mind like an old song stuck on repeat: you can't have your cake and eat it too. It was one of those sayings my mom would toss out during our weekly Sunday dinners, not that I ever really understood what it meant. I mean, if you had cake, wouldn't you want to eat it? That question had gnawed at me since I was a kid, and as I grew up, I started to view this conundrum as a metaphor for my life choices, especially as I navigated the tricky waters of my on-again, off-again relationship with Jess. Jess and I had met in college, our paths colliding like two planets destined to orbit one another. We had our highs, filled with the light of new love, lazy Sunday mornings, laughing endlessly over board games, late-night cooking experiments that usually ended in disaster. But the lows could drag us deeper than I cared to admit, arguments about petty things that ballooned into volcanic eruptions, only for us to push reset and pretend they never happened. It was after one such heated fight about where we wanted our lives to go that I found myself on Reddit, sipping my lukewarm coffee, scrolling through Ask Reddit threads, looking for solace or validation. Someone had posted about phrases that made no sense, and there it was again, the phrase that haunted me: you can't have your cake and eat it too. I chuckled bitterly, realizing that it encapsulated my dilemma perfectly. I wanted both the stability of a committed relationship and the freedom to explore who I was apart from Jess. And with each scroll, my mind started to race. Was I being unfair by wanting both? As I deliberated, a thought struck me: maybe I was supposed to just decide, but how could I when each option felt fundamentally flawed? Jess had been so supportive of my dreams, but I couldn't shake this feeling that I was suffocating her with my indecisiveness. I decided to invite her over, thinking it might be easier to untangle these thoughts together. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow through the window, highlighting the chaos of our living room, books scattered on the floor, takeout containers still on the counter. When Jess arrived, her smile lit the room, but I could sense an undercurrent of tension vibrating between us. We sat on the couch, awkwardly trying to make small talk, but it soon fell flat. Finally, I took a deep breath and plunged into the depths of my thoughts, spilling out my fears and uncertainties while she listened, her face a mixture of surprise and understanding. I confess that I felt like I was wanting something I couldn't clearly define. Jess nodded, allowing me to speak without interruption, and when I finished venting, she looked at me softly. "It sounds like you're scared, but not of me or us," she replied delicately. "You're scared of becoming stagnant." Her words hung in the air, heavy with recognition. I hadn't put it together until she said it, but she was right. A part of me longed for adventure, the wild insatiable need to travel, to breathe experiences beyond the confines of our small town. Jess offered to help me explore that, suggesting weekend trips or classes that could satiate my craving for more, grounding me while still letting me spread my wings. And as we talked into the night, I felt that familiar warmth settle back into my chest. When I finally went to bed, it struck me, perhaps the real wisdom was in the idea that choices didn't have to be rigid. Maybe I didn't have to sacrifice one happiness for another. Maybe I could bake 2 cakes, one for now, and one for later. Weeks passed, and our dynamic transformed. We found ourselves signing up for dance classes together and planning a small trip to the mountains, combining my longing for freedom with our shared commitment. The phrase that had once felt so suffocating began to lose its power over me. I realized that while you can't have your cake and eat it too in a literal sense, life isn't always that black and white. The more I allowed Jess in on my dreams, the more support I felt, freeing me to embrace the complexities of my existence. In the spirit of the Reddit threads I had once sought comfort in, I thought it fitting to provide a little update, an epilogue of sorts. About a month later, Jess and I were planning a spontaneous trip to a beach we hadn't been to since early summer. As we drove, I turned the radio down and asked, "So, what do you want to do after this? More travel? Classes?" She looked at me, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "How about both? We can have our cake and eat it too," she teased, and I burst into laughter, realizing that perhaps my journey to find balance was one I could continue sharing with her. That night, as I fell asleep, I felt liberated knowing that my life didn't have to adhere to anyone else's rules, and while I might never fully grasp the meaning behind that silly saying, I could at least make my own sense of it all. The days that followed were a delightful haze of spontaneous adventures and late-night musings, the kind of soft chaos that comes from living life on your own terms. Every morning, we'd meet at our favorite cafe, a cozy little place with creaky wooden floors and mismatched chairs that felt like an extension of our own eclectic personalities. The owner, an eccentric old man named Jonah, would greet us with the same goofy grin each time, saying, "You're 2 peas in a pod, ladies." It became a running joke, one that made us chuckle as we sipped steaming cups of coffee and shared our dreams, from obscure travel destinations to the prospect of enrolling in courses that would allow us to explore our creative sides. One morning, Sarah suggested we sign up for a pottery class. "Imagine the mess we'll make. It could be a disaster, but a fun one," she nudged, her enthusiasm infectious. I hesitated at first, intimidated by the idea of molding clay, then remembered my newfound mantra about balance. "Why not?" I said, surprising myself with my own eagerness, and we soon found ourselves with our names on a list beside a host of other brave souls willing to wrestle with their artistic limitations. The class turned out to be one of the most rewarding experiences. We fumbled, laughed, and accidentally flung handfuls of clay at each other. The instructor, a warm woman named Linda, guided us patiently, her laughter ringing through the studio as our creations often morphed into something unrecognizable. Yet, with each failed attempt, I felt my heart loosen, the tension of needing to excel slipping away with every imperfect pot or crooked vase we shaped. It was liberating in a way I'd never expected, the act of creating becoming a therapy session and a celebration of our flaws and companionship. After one particularly absurd class where we mistakenly mixed red and green clay, resulting in an unpleasant shade that resembled an unappetizing stew, Sarah turned to me, her hands covered in a mixture of colors, and said, "Look at that. We just became abstract artists." As weeks passed, we also found ourselves exploring goods at local flea markets, capturing moments with our phone cameras, and building an impromptu scrapbook of our debauchery, filled with ripped ticket stubs, photographs of us making exaggerated silly faces, or random notes we jotted down purely for laughter's sake. One evening, while flipping through our new book of misadventures beneath the glow of fairy lights on Sarah's balcony, a wave of pure gratitude washed over me. I couldn't help but reflect on how far I had come from being trapped in the rigid expectations I'd once believed I had to follow. It was as if I had been carrying a heavy backpack filled with old ideas and rules about how life should be lived, and each experience with Sarah helped me to shed a few more pounds until I felt free to walk my own path. But just as I began to feel I had everything figured out, life threw a curveball. One night, after a lovely dinner where we feasted on Thai takeout and laughed until our cheeks were sore, Sarah suddenly grew quiet. I noticed her staring at her phone, her brow furrowed and lips pressed into a thin line. "Hey, what's wrong?" I asked, concern threading through my voice. She glanced up, trying to muster a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's my mom," she said softly, her voice trembling ever so slightly. "She's going through a rough patch. I think she might need me." My heart sank at the thought of her leaving, the thought of losing what we had begun to build together in this journey of balance and creativity. In that moment, I felt a familiar knot of uncertainty tighten my chest again. "How long are you thinking of going?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite my inner turmoil. Sarah took a deep breath, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I don't know. A week maybe? She just sounds really overwhelmed and I feel like I should be there." As she spoke, I could see the conflict written all over her face, her desire to support her family clashing with the joy she had found in our friendship. I felt a pang of selfishness at the very thought of her needing to leave. How could I remind her of the beautiful balance we had created if I was only thinking of myself? So, I reached for her hand, intertwining our fingers in a brief moment of solidarity. "Sarah, you have to go. Family comes first, and I would never want to hold you back from that." We both sat in silence for a moment, holding on to each other, and I assured her, "I'll be right here when you come back. We can pick up where we left off." She nodded, a smile breaking through her sadness, but I could detect a hint of guilt in her eyes. I didn't want my own fears to dim the light of her compassion, so I wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close as memories of our laughter filled the air around us. In that embrace, there was an understanding. She needed to care for her mother, and I needed to let her go, at least for a little while. That night, as sleep washed over me, I wrestled with conflicting emotions, but I took comfort in the thought that we were both on our own journeys toward the elusive balance we sought. In the following weeks, Sarah was often across the phone screen, sharing snippets of her time with family, moments punctuated with laughter, but also clouded by a piercing worry. I kept up with our pottery class, crafting lopsided creatures that always brought me back to her and her infectious laughter. Each day felt like an exercise in patience, but I focused instead on immersing myself in my own creations, slowly learning that empty time not spent with friends could still be filled with purpose. Eventually, after what felt like an eternity but was merely a month, the day arrived when Sarah called, her voice ringing bright and clear on the other end. "I'm back. And I've missed you like crazy," she exclaimed, an effervescence that rivaled the bubbles in the soda I was currently sipping. We scheduled a reunion filled with stories and laughter over our favorite meals, but more importantly, it became an opportunity for both of us to share our growth during our time apart. As we settled on her balcony, our familiar space, I was overcome with a sense of completeness. As she spoke about her experiences with her mother, I realized that the meaning behind those quirky expressions we often laughed about had shifted yet again. Life was about embracing the chaos, the uncertainties, and the joy that comes from simply being present with each other, much like our beautiful messes in pottery class. And as the sun set, casting a warm golden hue over our playful surroundings, I felt not only the sensation of our connection rekindling but the understanding that balance didn't mean never being apart. It meant knowing we both could carry our journeys and support each other all the same. Looking back, I'd find it easy to chuckle at the foolishness of sayings that once perplexed me. Having our cake and eating it too became a cherished memory of sweet times shared, both together and apart. And as I lay my head down to sleep that night, the warmth of reconnection enveloped me like a soft blanket, reminding me that the true essence of balance was found not in the rigid chapters we penned but rather in the laughter, the love, and the art of simply being. In the weeks that followed, I found myself tackling each day with a renewed spirit, a vibrant sense of possibility filling the corners of my mind that had once been dimmed by the weight of expectations. Amelia and I dived into spontaneous adventures, our schedules freeing up in ways I had never thought possible. One weekend, we hopped into her old hatchback, the jazz music pulsating through the speakers, the air thick with the scent of blooming wildflowers as we drove toward the mountains. We ventured off the beaten path, often leaving our plans in the dust, reveling in the act of simply exploring. I remember one particularly magical afternoon when we stumbled across a hidden waterfall. Its waters glimmered like diamonds in the sunlight, and as we stood there, the roar of the falls cascading down drowned out the noise of the outside world, leaving only the sound of our laughter echoing around us. I found the purest joy in those moments, a kind of euphoria that made the silly saying, the one I had initially brushed off as nonsense, now feel like a charming puzzle I wanted to solve. Every time we indulged in a piece of cake, whether it was a slice from a charming coffee shop or the store-bought kind savored after an exhausting trek, it came wrapped in laughter, sweetening our wouldn't have been happy about it days. Yet amidst the joy was a quiet understanding that our journeys were not without their challenges. Each of our individual paths had begun to twist and turn, bringing unexpected obstacles even as they interwove now with shared dreams. As the leaves began to change with the approach of fall, a hint of worry settled in my stomach, neutralizing the sweetness of those carefree days with a pinch of salt. I felt a growing pressure about the decisions looming ahead, my career trajectory, my financial goals, the desire to move forward while also nurturing the beautiful bond we had started to build. One evening, as we sat by the fire at her family's cabin, I let those thoughts spill out, almost reluctantly. Does it ever feel like we're on a tightrope, swinging back and forth with so many expectations? I asked, watching the flames flicker and dance. The crackling would wrap around my voice, giving it a moment to linger in the air. Amelia paused, her marshmallow on a stick hovering over the embers. Oh, totally, she chuckled, but there was an edge of seriousness behind her laughter. You feel like you can only take one step before something gives? She continued, her expression thoughtful, but vibrant with understanding. Her candidness made it easier for me to articulate the knots I had been tying in my chest. I don't want to let go of these moments with you, but I also don't want to be chasing after shadows when there's a whole sun rising over here, I confessed, the warmth of the fire reflecting in her deep-set brown eyes. Somehow, my heart felt lighter after sharing, almost as if exposing those fears to the open air could diffuse their weight. She reached for my hand, a firm squeeze that reminded me we were in this together, even if the answers remained fuzzy. Maybe balance doesn't mean splitting everything in half, she proposed, a smile breaking through the seriousness that filled our exchange. What if we don't chase some imaginary ideal? We embrace this mess of emotions and decisions. As she spoke, I felt the tension ease, the warmth of her words curling around my heart like the smoke swirling above us. We settled into a comfortable silence, the only sounds being the crackling fire and the occasional pop of the wood, sensations that felt grounding amidst the shifting sands of our thoughts. They say it takes time to grasp the meaning behind common sayings, but in this moment, I understood that finding balance didn't require perfection. It simply needed honesty, understanding, and the willingness to reshape the narrative. Weeks turned into months, and together, we picked through the chaos, sometimes stumbling, but more often laughing, the echo of our carefree adventures merging with the sounds of life ahead. The holidays approached, and with them, discussions about where we might go next and how we could create lasting memories together. One evening, as snowflakes blanketed our town, I made a cake, our favorite recipe, as a way to toast to where we were and where we might go. The scent of vanilla woven with cinnamon filled her kitchen, wrapping us in warmth while echoing with nostalgic laughter from our past. As we enjoyed that cake, rich and decadent, it hit me how much I had grown. In my urge to find clarity, I had found companionship and the beauty of shared experience. I had learned to savor not only the sweet moments but also to embrace the complexities of life that often trailed behind, understanding that even in chaos, there could be joy. And it was in that kitchen, laughing over crumbs and crumbs of conversations, that I realized this journey was as much about cultivating joy in the mundane moments as it was about making big plans for the future. Months later, and as I sit here now reminiscing on those days, I have a sweet piece of knowledge tucked away in my heart. It isn't just about having our cake. It's about finding the right people with whom to share it, making sense of the nonsense together, crafting our own meanings, and knowing that in our laughter and shared experiences, we were crafting a life that looked unexpectedly beautiful. And so, with the summer sun peeking through my window and the birds chirping in delight, I take a deep breath, ready for the chapters that lay ahead. Blissfully unaware of the surprises they might hold.